Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to be doing this super cute tumbler right here. This is a winter themed tumbler that I made for a winter cup swap that I am part of, and I am so excited to share with you how I did this entire process. So of course, everything that I use in today's tutorial will be listed and linked down in the description box below, as well as any discount codes that may save you some extra money in the process. So let's go ahead and jump right into today's tutorial. So I have a 32-ounce plump that I'm going to be using today. I will link them in the description box. I purchased this from the Steel Magnolia. I have already sanded my cup and cleaned it off with 91% alcohol. And so now, because this is a split cup design, I'm going to be using painter's tape to split my cup directly in half. So I just like to eyeball this. You are more than welcome to measure the halfway point of your cup and apply your tape that way. I just have done this style and design so often that I'm pretty good at just eyeballing it and making the cup split completely in half on both sides. So I just put the painter's tape down the bottom center line area and then very carefully make sure to make a straight line down both straight edges of the cup. So now I'm going to trim up this vinyl that I got from the Vinyl Cottage in a mystery box for the month of November. It was December winter themed, and when I saw this pattern, I just was in such awe. It's a beautiful like winter mitten and like winter floral pattern, and then the background is actually like this wood crackle like looking background. It's a really cute and pretty design. So as soon as I saw this in the box that I got from them, I was so excited and couldn't wait to use this on a cup. So I'm just going to trim up the edges here, just removing that excess white edge there, and then I'm going to trim this in half to fit my tumbler. So taking the side that I'm going to be applying the vinyl on, I'm just going to measure so that I know how much of the vinyl I'm going to be using, and then I will trim up the edge of that vinyl, just splitting it where I have a little bit of excess on either side of that tape line to just make sure, in case this goes on a little bit crooked, I have a little bit of some leeway and extra room to be able to get this vinyl on the cup perfectly. So now that my vinyl is all trimmed up in the section that I'm going to be using, I'm going to go ahead and put my cup back into my cup cradle and get this vinyl applied to the cup. So just like I always do, I'm just going to peel the backing of this vinyl about a ½ inch to an inch or so and fold that white backing back, and then apply that edge of the vinyl, the sticky side, to my cup to kind of anchor it or adhere it down to my cup. So I like to apply that edge right on top of that painter's tape, a little bit on that, just so that I can make sure that I have a nice straight edge. It just helps keep everything nice and aligned. And so when I feel that everything is straight, I'm gonna go ahead and just very slowly pull the backing from away from the vinyl, and with my hands just smooth out those sections of the vinyl in piece by piece. So I like to go pretty slow with this just to make sure that I'm not getting any air bubbles in my vinyl as I am rolling that backing off. Using only half the sheet, this is pretty quick and easy as opposed to doing a full vinyl wrap. However, definitely take your time, and you can always pull back up that vinyl when the backing is still on. It's a little bit harder to do though when you have removed the backing entirely. So now just with my craft knife, I'm just going to pop any of the air bubbles that may have gotten under the vinyl and just poke a small hole in the vinyl and smooth that out. So now that the vinyl is adhered to the cup, I'm now going to work on my edges. So I like to run my nail along the painter's tape under the vinyl to create that dent so that I can see that fine line of painter's tape, and then take my craft knife and trim up that edge. I do leave a little bit of an overlap on that painter's tape just to make sure that my line doesn't get all wiggly and squiggly and I have a giant piece of stainless steel cup showing under the vinyl. So gonna do the same thing with the other side, and then we'll get the top and bottom of the cup trimmed up. So now that the painter's tape has been removed, I'm going to work on the top and bottom edge of this cup. So this vinyl does stretch quite a bit, and so I'm just going to pull on the top and bottom edge here to really get that vinyl to go over the edge and tuck that into the top. I'm going to do the same thing with the bottom, except for here with the bottom, I am only going to cut around that inner circle of this cup. So I really am pulling very taut over that rounded bottom edge and making sure to make a nice smooth bottom, and then cutting around that inner circle with my craft knife. And now I'm going in just with my little squeegee tool that I use for vinyl to just tuck in the vinyl over the lip of that cup into that kind of circle area on the bottom section of the cup. So this is just to make it nice and smooth and kind of have a seamless bottom. We're going to cover up this bottom anyway, but anything to make a kind of drama-free epoxy application process. So now I'm just going to trim up the top edge with my craft knife, just running that along the inner edge of the cup, trimming off that extra vinyl, and there you go. So this is completely ready to be moved on to the next step. So now that everything is nice and trimmed up, we're going to go ahead and move on to applying our glitter. So I've just taped off my vinyl section with some blue painter's tape just to make sure I don't get any of the paint on the vinyl. And so now I'm going in with a soft paintbrush and Primetime from Counterculture DIY to base paint my tumbler here. So I like to use Primetime when I can't use spray paint, so definitely a great alternative to spray painting if you hate spray painting, or if you're suffering a shortage in your area of spray paint, which I know a lot of areas are. This is a great alternative to be able to base coat your cups and get them prepped and ready for glittering or any other design that you're doing on your tumblers. So I'm going to be applying 2 coats of Primetime here to my tumbler, just this half. I'm not going to pay any mind to the bottom section of the cup, since I will be going in with a piece of vinyl from this design on the bottom. So I'm not really worried too much about making sure that that section is painted. So I'm just going to apply a thin coat here. I then will speed up the drying process by using my heat gun, and then go in for a second coat before it's time for glitter. So let's go ahead and jump right to the best part of the process of making a tumbler. Let's jump right into glittering. Okay, so now with my cup completely base painted on that one side, I'm going to be using Mod Podge today to apply my glitter. So just putting a bit of Mod Podge on my cup, and then using my paintbrush to spread out that Mod Podge evenly in a nice thin layer on this half of the cup. So I'm going to do 2 coats of glitter here with my Mod Podge application, just to make sure I get full coverage all over this side of the cup. So now that I have my Mod Podge applied, I'm going to go in with my glitters. So this entire side of the cup is going to be all white glitter. I am someone who has a lot of white glitter, as I think I mentioned in my last tutorial. I absolutely love using white glitters, and so I am just going to be using a lot of different cuts of white glitter to get a gorgeous look. So the first glitter that I've used here is Quinn. This is from Peachy Olive Glitters. It's a chunky, translucent white glitter, and it is just so pretty. I'm next going to be going in with Frosty. So Frosty is a brand new color from Peachy Olive Glitters in their last palette. Their last peachy palette. It's got these super cute like silver stars in it. It's just a beautiful look. I'm now going to go in with a glitter from Glitter Makes It. It's called I Like Warm Hugs, and it's along the same lines of Quinn, just a smaller cut there of that glitter. And then the final glitter that I'm going to be going in with is Ermagerd. So this is also from Peachy Olive Glitters. It's a very fine cut white glitter, and that is what I'm going to be using to get full coverage and blend in all those different white colored glitters. So with that all tapped off, I am then going to just let this dry for a little bit and go in with my second coat of glitter, just like I did with the first coat. Now that my Mod Podge has dried, I then just take a dry chip brush and just brush off any of the loose glitter that may still be on the cup. And now I'm going to go in with Minwax's Polycrylic to seal in my glitter. So you could use CC DIY's Quick Coat as well as an alternative. I just have been using Minwax since I have such a large can of it until this is kind of empty. But this is also a great sealer that you can use for sealing in glitters, sealing in decals, sealing in those holographic vinyls, all that good stuff that you need to make sure you have a drama-free epoxy process. So as soon as I have applied this thin layer, I'm going to let this polycrylic dry for 45 minutes to an hour. It's so important that you make sure that your polycrylic dries completely before you go into coats of epoxy. Otherwise, it will leave your glitter looking, or your epoxy looking rather cloudy. So super important that you make sure this is completely dry before you go in with coats of epoxy. So once it's dry, I'm going to put this back on the turner and I'm going to apply epoxy until smooth. For this cup, it took me 2 full coats of epoxy at about 30 mLs each of Amazing Quick Coat, and to get a completely smooth cup that is ready for sanding and decals. Okay, so now that my cup is completely smooth, I did take a 60 grit sanding block and just sand that top and bottom rim, making sure everything is completely smooth before I go to apply these vinyl decals. So this side of the cup is going to be a peekaboo, and I know what you're thinking. You were thinking I totally skipped the process of showing you this vinyl decal work. So I am going to do, as part of this tutorial, an in-depth going over of how I created the offset. I know many of you have asked how to do the offset file or offset use in Cricut Design Space. It's the design space that I'm most familiar in, so sorry for anybody who is a Silhouette user. I unfortunately am not familiar with that software, so I'll be showing you kind of how I did the offset for both the decal as well as the offset for the final decals in this tutorial, just kind of a little later in this tutorial. So I'm going to go ahead and get these vinyl decals applied to my cup so that I can prepare this cup for the peekaboo. So with this decal, I just created this hand lettered file in Cricut Design Space just with a couple of the fonts that I've already had and have downloaded previously. So I'm now just going to center my cup on my cup cradle and get this vinyl decal applied to my cup. So I am using removable vinyl for this decal, which is the best thing to use, especially if you don't have stencil vinyl, to apply any vinyl that you're going to be using for a peekaboo. Now that my decals are placed and in the positions that I need them to be, I'm then going to take some blue painter's tape, as I've used throughout this process, and I'm going to cover up the vinyl section of the cup. So I want to obviously spray paint the side with the decals, and in order to do so, I need to make sure that I protect the vinyl side of my cup to make sure I don't get any overspray or spray paint onto my vinyl. So I'm just going to take some blue painter's tape and just cover this entire side. You could also use saran wrap and just adhere both sides of that saran wrap with painter's tape. I just happen to have painter's tape closest to me, and it was just easier to use that. I am not going to cover up the bottom of the cup. I'm going to spray paint that when I spray paint the vinyl side of the cup, just so that I have kind of a unanimous color. It doesn't really matter. You could just tape that off, but it didn't matter if I got spray paint on it anyway. So I'm just going to finish going ahead and applying all of this blue painter's tape to my cup, making sure that every piece of the vinyl is covered. That way I don't get any spray paint onto the side of the cup. So now on to spray painting and then removing the vinyl pieces from this cup. Okay, so I applied 2 coats of flat white spray paint to this cup and waited until this was dry. I'm now going to be doing a wood grain look using Crimson Red from Ranger Alcohol Inks and a dry chip brush. So as you see, I did paint over the bottom section of the cup, and now I'm just going over all of those taped edges along the vinyl, making sure that there's no holes or bumps to make sure that I don't get any of this alcohol ink on my vinyl side. I want to make sure that my vinyl does not get any ink under it, because it is such a pain in the butt to try and remove alcohol ink from on top of epoxy. It typically leaves a bit of a stain. So I'm taking a dry chip brush and I'm using my red crimson alcohol ink to put a line of alcohol ink down the cup, and then brushing my cup in an upward or downward motion to create that wood grain look. So I wanted to try this with red. I usually obviously always do wood grains in more of a brown or dark wood mahogany colored kind of ink, but I really wanted to try this red look. I just thought it would match so well with the flip side of the vinyl, just with that kind of wood look on that side, that crackle wood look, and it already having the red in it. I just thought this would be something that would be unique and different to do with this tumbler. So I'm just going to go ahead and do these thin lines of red alcohol ink and use my dry chip brush to apply the alcohol ink in that upward and downward motion. It's Totally okay if you put the alcohol ink on top of these sections over again. So when you are applying alcohol ink, you will notice that when you apply alcohol ink on top of itself, it does remove it slightly, but you're usually able to very quickly cover up that section. So obviously the goal here is to make sure that all of the white is covered with the alcohol ink and that there's no paint showing. Otherwise, you obviously would very much be able to tell that this is a spray painted cup and not a wood grain style cup. So I'm just going to go over all the sections, making sure that I get full coverage on this cup and that there is no white showing on this tumbler. So now that I've applied my red alcohol ink, I'm now going to go in and remove all of those stencils. So I'm using my little dental pick tool that I purchased from Amazon. I will link this in the description box below, and a pair of Cricut tweezers to remove all of this stencil work. So this was a little bit easier than some of the other peekaboo designs that I've done because we used the offset for this file or for this image. It was a much easier time removing the stenciling because they're much larger pieces to work with versus the small pieces that I typically have had to work with when doing a peekaboo style cup. So with this, it'll take you a little bit of time, obviously, to remove all of this stencil and removable vinyl from under this layer of alcohol ink. So just take your time and be super careful with your sharp tools. You do run the risk, obviously, of chipping or scratching the alcohol ink, and that would be so sad because then you'd have to go in and try and repair that. In the event that you do scratch or, scuff up your alcohol ink, you could just take a little bit of that same alcohol ink and a small dry paintbrush and just apply a little bit of alcohol ink to those scratches so that you can't see that white paint underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up this section of the video. You guys can watch me remove the rest of this vinyl in high speed with a little bit of music, and then we will move on to the next process. So voila, all the vinyl has been removed, as well as the blue painter's tape that covered up the vinyl side. This is going to sit overnight. I want to make sure that my alcohol ink sits overnight, and then I'll put this on the turner and apply another coat of epoxy. All right, so let's jump into Cricut Design Space. So this is the file that I created with a couple fonts I already had. And so now I am just going to do the offset portion. So I click the offset feature that is on the top panel there, and I'm going to toggle to 0.25 to create the offset for the lettering first. So Warm Winter Wishes. So as soon as I have it on 0.25, I like to select the rounded corners, and then I'm going to select Apply. So once I've got that offset done, I'm now going to do the same with the snowflakes. So again, selecting the snowflakes, going to 0.25, creating that offset and clicking Apply. Okay, so what I printed first was I printed the offset of the snowflakes and the Warm Winter Wishes, and that is the decals that I used to apply the removable vinyl to the peekaboo side. So now that I've done that, I'm going to create the silver lettering around. And so what I'm doing is I've selected both the individual words and the offset and clicked slice. So slice is in the bottom right hand corner, and this is going to give me kind of just the hollowed out offset of the wording. That way you can still see the word clearly, and that's what's actually going to show up as the glitter underneath. So I'm doing this with all three sections of letters. So now that I've done wishes, I'm going to do the word warm. So selecting warm and that offset, and then I just delete out the original as well as the cutout and leave just that hollowed out version of all three words. So once I've done that for the three words that I have here, Warm Winter Wishes, I'm going to do the exact same thing with my snowflakes. So again, selecting one of the snowflakes with the offset pattern and then clicking slice, and that is going to give me the exact pattern that I need or outline of that offset so that I have kind of a silver outline of all the words and snowflakes on my peekaboo side of the cup. So everything that is hollowed out is going to show all of that beautiful white glitter underneath that red wood grain. So I hope that this was pretty helpful as far as how I create kind of the offset wording, as well as how I get kind of that hollowed out look that I know I've done a few times before in a couple tutorials. So if you have questions on how to do this in Cricut, certainly feel free to leave those down in the comments or shoot me a message on social media. I'd be more than happy to help anybody who may be having difficulties with getting this process to look as is. So let's go ahead and move on to applying this to the cup. Okay, so I printed the offset file in Cricut. I cut this on some silver textured metallic. So you guys know I have used the gold textured metallic vinyl quite often, and so I just printed this in the silver version. I also did print a circle using the shapes feature at about 3.25 on that vinyl that I used on the flip side of the cup, and that is what I'm applying to the bottom. So the 3.25 inch round circle is the perfect fit for the bottom. It goes just slightly over the rounded edges, so you're able to really create a gorgeous seamless look. So just applying that with my tape there to the bottom portion of the cup and just making sure that it's nice and sealed. There's no bubbles or wrinkles or anything crazy to prevent that from sticking to the bottom or giving me any hassles during the epoxy process. So now we're going to go ahead and apply the warm winter wishes to the cup. So what I'm going to do is just use transfer tape that I have, and I'm going to be applying this with my transfer tape, and I like to focus because these three words are connected. I obviously can't just cut them and use one section at a time. I have to do it in one piece. So I'm going to focus on the largest word, which is the word in the center, winter, to help me focus and align that center section. That way I know that once that center section is fully around that word winter, I know that the top warm and the bottom wishes wording will fit perfectly as well. So right now I'm just focusing on kind of that middle section of winter. I'm focusing on that T and N section to make sure that it is right around the glitter and that there isn't any glitter exposed on the top or bottom. So once that middle section is nice and adhered, I then know that the top and bottom words are going to fit right around that without it being off in any way. So now I'm just going to remove the transfer tape off the warm winter wishes, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with my snowflakes. So I'm just going to take a piece of transfer tape and just apply those. These are quite a bit easier to get applied because it's only 3 of them. So because they're not connected, I can just apply them one at a time over those snowflake sections so that I can make sure that I get a perfect kind of covering of those without any of that glitter showing on the outer edges of the stencil here. So just going to apply that second one and get those on to the cup. So now for my seams. So the seam where the vinyl and the wood grain meet. So I have some silver metallic vinyl, textured vinyl that I have from Cricut. So I cut some lines in these quite a while ago, and I've actually used all of the cutout lines that I have. But what I have been doing is, because these were so evenly placed when I cut them, I've just been using that center section. So it's the same width of the original rectangles that I used, which was like 0.15, I think was the size of this in height. And so I'm just using those kind of small sections of this textured vinyl to apply to either seam. So I'm only going top to bottom. I'm not covering the bottom piece because we already have that round circle piece of vinyl on the bottom. So that gives that gorgeous seamless look. So I don't have to worry about carrying this textured vinyl all the way down through the bottom of the cup. So once these are applied, the very last thing that I'll do is I'm going to apply some polyacrylic over top of my vinyl pieces here to make sure that I don't get any issues with lifting of this vinyl. And this is going to go back on the cup turner for, 2 final coats of epoxy to make sure that this cup is perfectly sealed. If you loved today's video, be sure to give this video a huge thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys again next week. Bye!